I was working at a hotel desk in Amsterdam when an American couple walked up to me. They looked confused. The man pointed at his phone and said, "Excuse me, we've been walking for 2 hours trying to find Paris. Google Maps says it's only 300 miles away." "Where is it?" I blinked. "Sir, Paris is in France." "You're in the Netherlands." He stared at me like I was the one being ridiculous. "Yeah, but 300 miles isn't that far. We walked like 5 miles already. Shouldn't we be seeing the Eiffel Tower by now?" His wife nodded along. "We thought Europe was small. Can't we just walk there?" I had to explain that 300 miles is actually 300 miles, no matter what continent you're on. They seemed genuinely shocked. They asked if there was a shuttle bus. Another guest overheard this conversation. A Swedish woman. She just looked at me and whispered, "Does this happen often?" I said, "More than you'd think." That same week, I had an American woman ask me where she could exchange her dollars for European money. I told her she needed euros. She said, "Right, that's what I meant. European money. Is it all the same? Like, can I use it in London too?" I explained that the UK uses pounds, not euros. She looked annoyed. "That's so confusing. Why doesn't Europe just pick one currency?" I didn't have the heart to tell her that most of Europe actually does use the euro. She wasn't ready for that conversation. My coworker told me about a guest who asked if the Anne Frank house was based on a true story. He thought it was like a museum themed around a book. When my coworker explained that Anne Frank was a real person who hid from the Nazis during World War II, the guest said, "Oh, wow. They made a book about it? That's cool." These moments happen so often that we started keeping a notebook behind the desk. We write down the wildest questions. It's become a thick notebook. I've spent 5 years collecting these stories, the kind most tourism workers never write down. I break down cultural collisions like this every week, the patterns nobody else tracks. If you recognize the value in that kind of ground-level anthropology, subscribe. You'll see things other travel channels won't show you. One guy asked if he needed a passport to take the train to Belgium. When I said yes, he seemed upset. "But it's right there. I can see it on the map. It's like an inch away." I told him that's not how countries work. He said, "In America, I can drive from New York to California without a passport." "That's way farther," I agreed. "Yes, but those are both in America. Belgium is a different country." He genuinely seemed to think Europe was just one big place where borders didn't matter. He asked if we had states instead of countries. I spent 15 minutes explaining the European Union to him. He left more confused than when he started. These stories sound made up. I wish they were. But after working in tourism for 5 years, I've learned that cultural confusion works both ways. It's just that Americans abroad seem to have a special talent for it. My friend works at a train station in Brussels. She sells tickets. An American family came up and asked for tickets to Africa. Not a specific country in Africa, just Africa. She asked, "Which part of Africa?" The dad said, "Doesn't matter. We just want to see it." "How long is the train ride?" She had to explain that there's no train from Belgium to Africa. There's an ocean in the way. The Mediterranean Sea, then more land, then another sea, he argued with her. He said his travel agent told him you could take trains anywhere in Europe. She tried to clarify that Africa is not in Europe. He pulled out his phone and showed her a map. He pointed at Morocco. "That's only a few inches away on here." His teenage son looked embarrassed. The kid clearly knew this was wrong, but the dad kept insisting. Finally, my friend suggested they take a train to Spain and then maybe look into flights from there. The dad seemed satisfied with this answer, even though it wasn't what he wanted to hear. I heard about an American tourist in Ireland who asked a local where the border with Scotland was. The local explained that Scotland is part of Great Britain, which is a separate island. The tourist said, "Yeah, but where's the bridge?" There is no bridge connecting Ireland to Scotland. The tourist couldn't accept this. He said he'd driven across the country and hadn't seen any water. The local had to explain that Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland are different, and that he was probably thinking of the UK border, which is complicated for entirely different reasons. The conversation went in circles. Finally, the local just said, "There's no bridge. You'd need a ferry or a plane." The tourist walked away, muttering about how maps don't make sense. A German friend told me about an American exchange student who showed up to university in Munich. First day of orientation. The student asked when they'd be taking trips to Paris on the weekends. The coordinator said Paris wasn't close enough for casual weekend trips. The student pulled out a map of Europe. "But look, it's right here. It's touching Germany." The coordinator zoomed in on the map. "That's about 500 kilometers away. That's an 8-hour drive." The student seemed shocked. "I thought Europe was small." "Everyone says it's small." The coordinator explained that Europe is smaller than the United States, but it's still an entire continent. Countries have actual distance between them. The student spent the whole semester surprised by how long it took to travel anywhere. Another story from Rome. A couple asked their tour guide if they could do a day trip to Egypt to see the pyramids. The guide said no. Egypt is in a completely different country, across the Mediterranean Sea, in North Africa. The wife said, "But isn't Rome close to everything? We read that Rome is central." The guide agreed that Rome is centrally located in Europe. But Egypt is not in Europe. The couple seemed disappointed. They'd apparently planned their whole trip around seeing the pyramids without realizing they'd need to book a separate flight to Cairo. My cousin works at a tourism office in Vienna. An American tourist asked her what language they speak in Australia. She said, "English, mostly." He shook his head. "No, I mean Austria. Here," she realized the confusion. "Oh, we speak German here." "You're thinking of Australia, the country with kangaroos. That's a different place. Far away." He laughed like she was joking. Then he realized she was serious. He asked how far away Australia was. She said about 16,000 kilometers. He went quiet. Then he asked if his hotel was closer to Austria or Australia. She reminded him he was standing in Austria. He nodded slowly. Then he left, without asking any more questions. Another tourist asked a local in Norway if they could take a quick trip to the North Pole. The local asked why they thought that was possible. The tourist said, "We're already up north. How much farther can it be?" The local explained that the North Pole is still over 2,000 kilometers away in the Arctic Ocean, and that there's no casual tourism infrastructure there. The tourist seemed let down. He said he thought Scandinavia and the Arctic were basically the same thing. I had a guest in Amsterdam ask if we were near Germany. I said yes, relatively close, about 2 hours by train. He seemed relieved. He said, "Great, we'll walk there tomorrow morning." I suggested he take the train instead. He said walking would be more authentic. I showed him the distance on a map. He still seemed to think it was doable. His friend convinced him otherwise. I don't know if they ever made it to Germany. These moments taught me something. Americans grow up in a massive country where you can drive 12 hours and still be in the same nation. They're used to that scale. When they come to Europe and see a dozen countries packed together on a map, they assume everything is within walking distance. It's not malicious. It's just a completely different understanding of space and distance. I worked at a cafe in Paris for 2 years. One morning, an American tourist ordered a coffee. I brought him an espresso. He looked at the tiny cup and said, "This is wrong. I ordered a coffee." I told him this was a coffee. "A café." He shook his head. "No, I want a regular coffee, like a normal size." I asked if he wanted an American, which is espresso with hot water. He said sure. I brought it to him. It was still in a normal-sized cup, maybe 200 milliliters. He looked frustrated. "Why is everything so small here?" I explained that this is the standard size. He asked if we had large or extra large. We didn't. Not the way he was imagining. He ended up ordering 3 cups and pouring them into his water bottle. Other customers stared. My manager told me about an American woman who got upset because we didn't have iced coffee. It was February, in Paris. She said Starbucks had iced coffee year-round back home. My manager explained we weren't Starbucks. She asked why not. He didn't have a good answer for that. A friend in Italy told me about an American couple at a restaurant. They asked for the check immediately after ordering. The waiter was confused. They explained that in America you pay right away sometimes. The waiter said, "That's not how it works in Italy. You eat first, then pay." The couple seemed suspicious, like it was a trick. They asked if they could pay up front anyway, just to be safe. The waiter said no. The system wasn't set up for that. They reluctantly agreed, but seemed uncomfortable the whole meal. When the check finally came, they left a 20% tip. The waiter tried to give it back. They insisted he keep it. He explained that service was included in the bill. They didn't understand. They thought he was being polite. He had to get the manager to explain that tipping isn't customary in Italy. The couple left looking confused. They probably thought everyone was being weird. Another time in Spain, an American tourist asked why the shops were closed at 3 in the afternoon. The local explained it was siesta time. Many businesses close for a few hours in the afternoon. The tourist said, "That's so lazy. What if I need something?" The locals suggested he plan ahead or come back later. The tourist complained that this would never happen in America. The local shrugged. "You're not in America." The tourist posted about it online later, calling it bad customer service. A bunch of Spaniards replied, explaining that siesta is a cultural tradition tied to the heat and lifestyle. The tourist doubled down, saying culture shouldn't inconvenience customers. The internet did not side with him. I heard about an American family in Germany who got upset at a restaurant because the waiter wasn't checking on them every 5 minutes. In America, servers come by constantly asking if everything's okay. In Germany, that's seen as intrusive. You eat in peace. If you need something, you flag them down. The family thought the service was terrible. They left a bad review online. Germans replied to the review explaining that hovering is considered rude there. The family edited the review but still seemed to think German restaurants should adapt to American expectations. A Swedish friend told me about an American tourist who got mad. Because the grocery stores weren't open 24 hours, he needed milk at 11 at night. Everything was closed. He asked why Sweden didn't have all-night stores. She said most places close by 8 or 9. He said that was unacceptable. What if there was an emergency? She asked what kind of emergency required milk at 11 p.m. He didn't have an answer. He just kept saying it was inconvenient. Another story from the Netherlands. An American asked why everyone rode bikes instead of driving cars. A local explained that bikes are faster in the city, better for the environment, and parking is limited. The American said, "But what if it rains?" The local said, "We wear rain gear." The American couldn't wrap his head around it. He said it seemed impractical. The local pointed out that the Netherlands has some of the best cycling infrastructure in the world. The American still seemed skeptical. He rented a bike the next day and fell into a canal. He blamed the bike. In France, an American couple got upset because their hotel room didn't have air conditioning. It was May. The temperature was about 18 degrees Celsius. They were cold anyway and wanted the room warmer, but they kept calling it broken air conditioning. The receptionist explained that many older European buildings don't have AC because it's rarely needed. The couple demanded a refund. They said they couldn't sleep without climate control. The receptionist offered extra blankets. They declined and left a 1-star review. My coworker in Austria told me about an American who complained that no one spoke English at the grocery store. He said, "Isn't English the universal language?" My coworker said, "Not in Austria. We speak German." The American seemed annoyed. He said he'd been to 3 countries so far, and hardly anyone spoke English. My coworker asked which countries. He said Austria, Hungary, and Czech Republic. My coworker explained that those countries have their own languages. English is common in tourist areas, but not everywhere. The American said he didn't realize he'd need to learn phrases. He thought everyone in Europe spoke English. My coworker suggested he download a translation app. The American said that seemed like too much work. I was helping an American tourist in London who wanted to rent a car. He asked how many miles per gallon the car got. The rental agent said it was measured in liters per 100 kilometers. The tourist looked lost. "Can you convert that?" The agent tried. He explained the metric system. The tourist interrupted. "Why doesn't England use normal measurements?" The agent said, "We do. Metric is normal here." The tourist insisted that miles and gallons were easier. The agent pointed out that most of the world uses metric. The tourist said America was bigger than most countries, so that didn't matter. The agent stopped arguing and just gave him the car. Later, the tourist called the rental company complaining that the road signs were wrong. He thought the speed limits were way too slow. The agent asked what the signs said. He said 30 or 40. The agent explained those were in miles per hour, which is actually what the UK uses for road signs. The tourist paused. Then he said, "Oh, that makes sense. But why do the gas stations use liters then?" The agent sighed. "Because we use both systems. It's complicated." The tourist said that was the most confusing thing he'd ever heard. The agent agreed. A friend in Germany told me about an American student who showed up to class in shorts and a t-shirt. It was winter. The professor asked if he was cold. He said it was 70 degrees outside, so he dressed for warm weather. The professor said it was actually 21 degrees Celsius, which is about 70 Fahrenheit, but that's room temperature, not warm. The student didn't understand. He thought 70 was hot. The professor explained the Celsius system. The student asked why Europe couldn't just use Fahrenheit. The professor said, "Because Celsius makes more sense. 0 is freezing. 100 is boiling." The student said, "But I grew up with Fahrenheit. That makes sense to me." They went back and forth. Eventually, the student just started checking the weather in Fahrenheit on his phone. He spent the whole semester confused about why his weather app didn't match what locals were saying. In Switzerland, an American tourist asked a local why the signs showed distances in kilometers instead of miles. The local said, "Because that's what we use." The tourist said kilometers were harder to understand. The local asked why. The tourist said, "Because they're not miles." The local tried to explain that 1 kilometer is about 0.6 miles, so you just multiply. The tourist said that was too much math. The local suggested he get used to it. The tourist said he'd just avoid road trips. An American family in Sweden went to a deli and asked for half a pound of ham. The worker said they use grams. The family had no idea how many grams were in a pound. The worker suggested 200 grams. They agreed, even though they had no clue if that was right. When they got back to their hotel, they Googled it. Half a pound is about 227 grams. They felt like they'd been slightly ripped off, even though the difference was tiny. They debated going back. They didn't. Another story from France. An American asked a pharmacist for Tylenol. The pharmacist asked what dosage. The American said 500 milligrams. The pharmacist gave him paracetamol, which is the same thing. The American looked at the box and said, "This says 500 mg. I wanted milligrams." The pharmacist explained that mg stands for milligrams. The American didn't believe him. He thought it was a different unit. The pharmacist pulled up a conversion chart. The American finally accepted it, but still seemed doubtful. A Canadian friend told me about an American tourist in Toronto who got confused by the Celsius temperatures. It was -10 outside. The American thought that was impossible. He said, "How can it be negative? That doesn't make sense." The Canadian explained that Celsius uses 0 as the freezing point, so anything below that is negative. The American said Fahrenheit was better because it didn't have negatives as often. The Canadian said that wasn't really a benefit. The American disagreed. In Portugal, an American asked why the gas was so expensive. The local said it wasn't that bad. The American showed him the price. It was about €1.50 per liter. The local said that's normal. The American did the math wrong and thought it was equivalent to about $9 per gallon. He He was outraged, the local corrected him. It's closer to $6 per gallon. Still higher than the US, but not absurd. The American still thought it was robbery. The local explained that Europe has higher fuel taxes. The American said that was unfair. The local shrugged. My co-worker told me about an American who refused to believe that A4 paper and letter-sized paper were different. She worked at a print shop in Berlin. The American wanted something printed on letter size. She said they only had A4. He insisted they were the same. She showed him both sizes side by side. He said the difference was barely noticeable. She agreed, but said it still mattered for formatting. He accused her of being difficult. She printed his document on A4 anyway. He didn't notice. Another American in Denmark asked why the weather app said it was 25 degrees, but it felt warm outside. A local explained that was Celsius, which is about 77 Fahrenheit. The American said the app should specify. The local said it does, in the settings. The American didn't want to change his settings. He just complained about it instead. These misunderstandings happen because Americans grow up with imperial measurements and Fahrenheit. Everyone else uses metric and Celsius. Neither side is wrong. But when Americans travel without preparing for the difference, it creates these little moments of confusion. And sometimes frustration. Mostly confusion. Most travel content just shows you destinations. I show you the invisible systems, the measurements, the customs, the unspoken rules that trip people up. If you want to understand how the world actually works, not just where to take photos, you're in the right place. Subscribe for the framework, not just the highlight reel. I was back at the hotel desk in Amsterdam one evening when an American couple approached me. They'd been in Europe for 2 weeks. They looked exhausted. The man said, "We just realized we've been doing everything wrong." I asked what he meant. He said they'd been tipping everywhere, expecting giant coffee cups and converting every price back to dollars in their heads. They'd been frustrated the whole trip. Then they talked to another American who'd been living in Berlin for 3 years. That person told them to stop comparing everything to home. Just accept that things work differently. The man said, "It sounds obvious now, but we didn't get it until someone said it out loud." His wife nodded. "We've been judging everything by American standards. That's not fair to anyone. I told them it happens all the time. Most tourists do the same thing, not just Americans. It's human nature. You expect the world to work the way you're used to. When it doesn't, it feels wrong. But it's not wrong. It's just different." They thanked me and left. I think they actually enjoyed the rest of their trip. That's the thing about these stories. They sound ridiculous when you list them out. Americans asking if they can walk to Paris. Americans upset about small coffee cups. Americans confused by the metric system. It's easy to laugh, but it comes from a real place. These are people who grew up in a country that does things its own way. The US uses different measurements, different systems, different customs. When Americans travel abroad, especially for the first time, they're genuinely shocked that the rest of the world operates on completely different rules. It's not stupidity. It's unfamiliarity. And yeah, sometimes it's a lack of research. But mostly, it's just the collision of two different ways of seeing the world. Americans think of their country as the default. Everyone else thinks of their own country as the default. When those two defaults clash, you get these funny, awkward facepalm moments. I've collected hundreds of these stories over the years. And trust me, they never stop coming. Every tourist season brings a fresh wave of confusion. But here's the secret. By the end of their trips, most of these tourists figure it out. They adapt. They learn. They stop asking for ice in December. They stop trying to tip everyone. They download conversion apps. They accept that Europe is not a theme park version of America. And when they go home, they have stories to tell. Some of those stories are about the Eiffel Tower or the Colosseum, but a lot of them are about the time they asked a local where the bridge to Scotland was, and the local just stared at them in silence. Those are the stories that stick. The human moments that reveal how we all see the world differently. I collect these moments full-time, not just for laughs, but because they show us something real about how culture works. If that's the kind of travel content you want, the stuff that makes you think, not just scroll, subscribe. I do this every week, and the people who get it, get it.